and welcome to the Planet of Horror, where we cover your worst nightmares. I'm your host Kate, ready to provide you with today's dose of horror. So sit back, relax, and maybe grab something to cuddle. We think of our laws as covering everything, but sometimes we encounter such unique situations that we simply don't know how to deal with, and it causes a massive change in the law. Today, we are going to be covering one of these cases. I introduce to you the Hammsmith Ghost murder case. Our story starts in December 1803, England. England at this time was made up of a few cities that were dirty and overcrowded. The rest of England was small farming villages with dirt tracks. Hammsmith was one of these small villages, and with it being located just outside London, it had plenty of travellers and traders passing through, making it a very bustling village. But not all was good in this quiet little village. The inhabitants claimed a ghost was terrorising them. The ghost was described to be large, covered in a white shroud, and instilled fear. It was widely believed the ghost appeared as the church bells struck 1 o'clock in the morning, and it could be seen nearby. Villagers claimed it was confronting travellers, and in some cases physically attacking people. There was a report of the ghost scaring the driver of a wagon. It was being pulled by 8 horses and carrying 16 people. It was said to have scared the driver so much that he fled the scene, leaving the horses and the passengers behind. There was another report that details a pregnant woman walking through the churchyard. She described seeing a white figure rising from the tombstones, and as she went to run away, she said it grabbed her and caused her to faint. She was later discovered by neighbours who took her home to bed. One report says she died later of fear, but from my medical knowledge, that isn't likely. Someone can die from fear, but it's more to do with the amount of adrenaline going through a person's body, and it's more instant than that. It wouldn't happen hours and hours later. The people of Hammsmith thought the ghost to be the soul of a local man who committed suicide the year before. He was buried in the churchyard where it was most reported the ghost was seen. A lot of people didn't agree with him being buried on consummated grounds because of the way he died. With England at the time being of Christian religion, suicide is considered a sin, and it was believed his soul would not be allowed to rest because of this. The villagers were scared. Some started to think maybe the ghost wasn't a ghost at all, but a man dressing up, intentionally causing chaos. Others truly believed it to be not of this world. Either way, the village men felt their homes needed protecting, and so patrols were set up. Some of the village men would get together and walk the streets of Hammsmith at night, hoping to catch whoever or whatever it was. But unfortunately, the village had so many lanes and paths leading in and out of it, this proved to be more difficult than they expected. One member of the patrol claimed to have seen the ghost one night, and that he had seen him removing a white sheet from his body during an unsuccessful pursuit, giving evidence to the idea the ghost was in fact a man dressing up. All of it seemed to come to a head on one night, January 3rd. A man named Francis Smith had had enough of living in fear. He was frustrated at the patrol's lack of success catching the ghost, so he had decided to patrol the streets of Hammsmith on his own that night. It was a gloomy, dark and cold night as Francis made his way through the streets. keeping his eyes peeled for anything lurking around, waiting to scare people. As he started to turn and walk up Black Lion Lane, he spots a large white figure in front of him. In a panic, Francis yells at the entity, "Damn you! Who are you and what are you? Damn you, I'll shoot you!" But it doesn't listen and continues to walk forward. Francis is now terrified and so pulls out his gun and begins shooting at it. The figure falls to the ground, and at first Francis is relieved, but before he has chance to process it, a woman comes running over to the ghost he just killed. He realises it's not a ghost at all, but a normal man. The man is dressed in white linen trousers, white flannel waistcoat with a white apron and shoes. Francis starts yelling and running for help, but it's too late. The man is dead. The dead man was Thomas Millward, a local bricklayer and not the ghost of Hammersmith. The white clothing was part of his working uniform. He'd been heading home from a visit with his parents and sister, who lived on Black Lion Lane. According to Annie Millward, his sister, immediately after seeing her brother off, she heard Francis challenge him, after which Francis shot him in the left lower jaw and killed him. Annie was the woman that ran over to him. Francis was arrested soon after Millward's body was discovered. It was still a murder after all. Millward's body was thought to be taken to a nearby pub where an inquest into his death was held. The coroner ruled Millward died from a single gunshot wound that went through his mouth. During the investigation, witness accounts stated the night of the murder was so dark and gloomy that, combined with the limited light in the lane, it was difficult to see the other side, which was less than 40 yards away. Character witnesses for Francis also came forwards, stating he was gentle, mild-mannered, and only had good intentions when he went on patrol that night. He didn't have any intention to kill anyone. Francis himself tried to justify his actions, saying basically he was scared, and in an act of panic, he didn't realise what he was doing. The problem with that is the gun in question was from the 1800s, meaning it wasn't as simple as pulling a trigger. It was a blunderbuss, so it had to be physically loaded first. It's a lot of steps to not realise what you're doing. At the end of the inquest, the coroner ruled Francis's actions to be a rash act of willful murder, and he was sent to trial at the Old Bailey. I myself am conflicted. On the one hand, Francis clearly didn't mean to kill Millward. But the coroner is right. It was rash action to shoot someone. We also have to consider the time. It was the 1800s, where it was quite normal for men doing such jobs as patrolling to carry guns, and weren't exactly trained to talk it out. At Francis's trial, Millward's now widowed wife took the stand. She explained she had warned her husband something like this could happen. She detailed one evening Millward had come home and told her he just scared a few people on his way home that had also mistaken him as being the ghost due to his white clothing. She begged him at that time to start wearing a large coat in public to avoid any danger, but clearly he didn't listen. Millward's sister, on the other hand, testified although Francis shouted twice, he shot almost immediately. But again, it wasn't a gun you could simply pull the trigger with, so what is the context of immediately? After the judge and jury had heard all the evidence and testimony, the jury at least were very conflicted. Francis was open and admitted he killed Millwood. His defence was that he was protecting his village. He was scared, that he gave Millwood a warning, and ultimately it was a case of mistaken identity. He really thought Millwood was the ghost of Hammsmith. The court had the problem that Millwood was still a person. He was a good man and deserved justice. Furthermore, even if Francis had shot the real ghost that night, the crimes committed by the ghost were merely misdemeanors, barely anything. It still wouldn't have justified shooting him. The laws were very simple back then, and the judge advised the jury that malice was not required for murder, merely the intent to kill. On top of that, there was only 3 categories for murder. 1. Manslaughter, an accident. The jury initially ruled this, but the judge refused to take it, which, I get, it wasn't an accident. Francis aimed his gun at someone and shot. It was the wrong target, but he meant to hit something. 2. Self-defense. This didn't really fit, as Millwood had made no threatening action towards Francis. Francis had no reason to fear him. It was only his own paranoia. 3. Murder. You killed someone and you meant to. With the law not considering his intentions, Francis shot his gun at someone, knowing it would harm them. He committed murder. After the judge refused the verdict of manslaughter, he only gave the jury 2 choices. Either they find him guilty of murder, or they clear him of all charges. With not much choice, the jury found Francis guilty, and he was sentenced to death via hanging. But the story isn't over yet. Due to the uniqueness of the crime, the judge brought it to the attention of the king, which, in my head, the conversation goes something like this. So hey, I have this case here. A man murdered another man because he thought it was a ghost. So, should we kill him? After hearing the case, though, Francis's sentence was changed to a year of hard labour instead. In my head, the king read the case and was like, fucking idiot. In the end, Francis wasn't hanged. He took his punishment and went on with his life. The effect on the British law from his actions, however, would haunt lawyers for another 200 years. This case birthed the debate of, if you commit a crime, truly believing at the time you're doing the right thing, even if in reality you're not, is it a good reason not to be punished? This case was raised in court many times over the years in the defence of such people, until it was finally clarified in the case of Gladstone Williams in 1984. See, Gladstone had seen a man dragging another man down the street. The man being dragged was seemingly being assaulted and was shouting for help. Gladstone, thinking he was helping, stepped in and assaulted the man he thought to be the attacker. In reality, however, the man being dragged was not the victim, and in fact was a suspected thief. The other man was trying to apprehend him. Gladstone, as a result, was charged with grievous bodily harm. Gladstone appealed this decision, and it went through to the British Court of Appeal. The main point raised was if a man, based on their beliefs, came to the conclusion that they were being attacked or that a crime was being committed and that force was necessary to protect themselves or prevent a crime, even if the jury thinks it's an unreasonable conclusion to come to, the defendant should have the right to rely on their beliefs as a defence if they truly acted under them. Which I do get, because, like in the case of Francis, many people don't believe in ghosts and would think that's a stupid conclusion to come to. But many people also truly believe in them and could potentially become scared enough to act violently. I think it took so long for this kind of thing to be written into law because it took a case like Gladstone's where you could really relate to the situation. I think many people would come to the same conclusion in that situation. And I believe that's why they had to kind of clarify it and write it into law at that point, because they couldn't really argue against that. If you hadn't already come to the conclusion yourself, Gladstone's appeal was accepted and the charges against him were taken off his record. This section of the law is still in effect today and was written into the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act of 2008, Section 76. To round up today's episode and to tie up loose ends, the Hammsmith Ghost was eventually caught when a man named John Graham stepped forward and claimed responsibility for being the ghost. Graham claimed that he became the ghost and scared villagers to take revenge on his apprentice after they told his children scary ghost stories. So yeah, I don't think it would have made much of a difference if Francis had have shot the real ghost. He wasn't exactly a monster either. In the end, a real ghost was said to come out of the event. Poor Millwood, the pub which he was taken to after his death, is reported to still be haunted by his ghost. The pub today is known as the Black Lion and is sat on the north bank of the River Thames, where it's been for well over 2 centuries. So that's today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about our very complicated legal system. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think Francis's defence was reasonable? Please make sure you subscribe and click that bell notification so you know the next time I upload. And I hope to see you next time here on the Planet of Horror. Over and out.